Hello and welcome to another edition of I sign my name over and 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 over again. It's a fascinating television program in which one person signs their name over and over and over and over and over again. This has to be coming to an end because the Anthropocene Reviewed book goes to press very soon, and they need all of the sheets signed and at the printer in Virginia so that the little machine that shoots them into the binding process while the book is getting bound can have papers to go into it. I am down to like the last 15,000 signatures, but that is still a lot. Just to state the obvious, it's 6.5%, I think, of the total amount that I have to sign. But my hand hurts, and I'm very grateful for this work, and I feel really, really fortunate to be able to do it. But also, I am ready for it to be over, if we're being honest. I think this is the last time that I will be doing this. It is definitely the last time that I will be doing it at this scale. But if you live in the US or Canada, please pre-order a signed copy of the Anthropocene Reviewed book. I'm sorry if you don't live in the US or Canada, because then you can't pre-order a signed copy due to the vagaries of international copyright law and how international publishing in English works. So I'm sorry if you don't live in the US or Canada, but if you do, pre-order a signed copy if you want. No pressure. You don't have to. It's also a podcast. You can just listen to the podcast for free if you prefer. Although I think the book is better. So I've had a major innovation in the field of live streaming, which is that I can now see my own live stream comments. I feel like this is a major thing because now you can leave me a comment and I can see it. So there I am. I'm seeing somebody. Vienna just asked, "Are you a fan of One Direction?" Well, if you've read my book Turtles All the Way Down, you'll know that I'm at least familiar enough with One Direction to be able to put a lot of One Direction references into a book. I do like the music of One Direction, and I have long been fascinated by the fandom because I'm interested in really productive fan communities and what they can accomplish and the challenges that they face, the risks that they run, but also the productivity that they can have when they are organized well. Hank and I have really our whole careers, our whole lives been fascinated by fan communities that just get a lot of stuff done. And we've been lucky to be part of many such communities. And so I would say that I am a fan of One Direction, but more than that, I'm like a person who's fascinated by fandom. What are your thoughts on Jeopardy? I have not seen the program in a number of years, unless you're referring to like the concept of Jeopardy, in which case I feel that I am in it constantly and all the time without ceasing. That's how I feel about Jeopardy. Everything is far more precarious than we believe it to be, and we have to find a way to go on in the face of that precarity. That's what the Anthropocene Reviewed book is about. I spent the last 3 years trying to write about the phenomenon of Jeopardy and how we persevere despite the perpetual precarity with which we find ourselves. Oh, I got so much signing to do. How is the book different from the podcast? Asks Hafsa. So the book is 80,000 words long, and I think about 20,000 of the words are new. So it's approximately that different. There's several reviews that are not on the podcast, some of which are expanded from Vlogbrothers videos that I've made over the years, some of which are just new writing, some of which are expanded from art assignment videos that I made, or just things that I've written over the years. It's a big collage in a lot of ways. And then all the reviews are changed because they're expanded. I wanted them to be able to respond to the current historical moment, not all of them, but a lot of them. So some of the ones that were written in the before times have been changed to reflect the change in circumstance. And it's just different when you're writing for print than when you're writing for your voice. It's an inherently different enterprise. So that's what I've been doing for the last year, mostly the last year and a half, but especially the last 10 to 12 months is working on answering that question. How do you do some of what I was trying to do on the podcast, but without music, without the brilliant pauses that the editor of the podcast, Stan Meller, puts in there? How do you do it with text? And now I'm having this surreal experience of figuring out how to turn the text back into an audiobook, because there is going to be an audiobook, but the audiobook will have a slightly different set of reviews. I think it might have all of the reviews that are in the printed book, but it'll have a couple of reviews that aren't in the printed book, because there's some things that just did not work outside of audio, and I really like them, or I want to try to find a way to make them as good as I can make them with the stuff I've learned since. I mean, that's the biggest way it's changed, is that the way that I think about a bunch of stuff has changed in the last year. Of course, I think as is the case with everyone, but also I've learned a lot of stuff in the last year from people sending me emails with poems, or people sending me emails asking me if I had considered this or that facet of this question, or people writing to Anthropocene Reviewed on Twitter or whatever. So the book is, it's both very similar in the sense that most of the words that are in the book were in one episode or another of the podcast, but also very different in the sense that, I spent the last year doing little except trying to write it, and also trying to, make it through a plague, which has been challenging. Allison says, is it just me, or are the Sharpie sounds soothing? Let's just listen to them for a second, Allison. Let's just listen to 10 of them. Wasn't that lovely? Isn't that lovelier than anything I could say out loud anyway? I have come to really like the sound of Sharpie on paper, which is good, because if I didn't like it, I would have had to I don't know, I guess I would have not done this in the first place. But there's just a nice rhythm to it. My signing, it takes as long as it takes, and the rhythm is the rhythm. There's something kind of comforting about that there's not much I can do to speed it up. But I did a live stream on Tuesday that was 4 hours long, where someone pointed out to me that if I could find a way to speed up the process by just 1 second per sheet, then I would save 70 hours over the course of 250,000 signatures. So I could have reduced this from a 460-hour project to a 390-hour project, which would have been a pretty significant cost savings, and also I would be done. So on the one hand, I love that it takes as long as it takes, and I have my way of doing it, and there's a rhythm to it, and I just have to get lost in the flow of it. On the other hand, I can't stop thinking about how I could have saved 70 hours by just speeding up by 1 second. One of the lessons from that is that if you do anything this many times, it gets very time consuming. There is no, Addison says, Your first book came out before I was born, and now I have read almost all of your books. Just a little fun fact to make you feel old. Well, you've succeeded, Addison. I feel very old indeed. That's extremely strange to me. I mean, I never imagined that my books would be in print like for this long, let alone that they would be read by people who weren't born when they were published. My first book came out in 2005. My second book came out in 2006. And then I started making Vlogbrothers videos and things slowed down significantly. So my third book came out in 2008, then 2012, then 2017. So I've given you a chance to catch up, Addison, by slowing down my writing process as we built Crash Course and the art assignment and SciShow and the other Complexly things alongside making Vlogbrothers videos and trying to write. But yeah, thank you for reading my books. It doesn't actually make me feel old because I'm always aware of the fact that I'm old, and it's been I'm a long ways downriver from the writing of Looking for Alaska and really all of my novels, but especially Alaska, Catherine's, Paper Towns feel very, very distant to me. Feel like, I mean, all three of those books were written by somebody who wasn't a father, and just had was a very different person, different way of looking at the world, different way of looking at writing and books, honestly. And I'm really happy if those books can be useful. I'm really happy if like they can mean something to people in there now, and just really, really grateful because I did not. It's utterly unexpected. I mean, I remember when Looking for Alaska, when I first sold Looking for Alaska. So the reason I worked at Booklist magazine for 5 years before my first book came out. And Booklist magazine is this review journal that reviews like 400 books every 2 weeks. And so I just did like data entry there mostly, but I did end up reviewing a lot of books as a freelancer. But when you work at Booklist, you just see so many books come and go. Like I would review books that were, I thought, extraordinary, that I thought were really, really special. And within a couple years, they would basically be out of print. Even if they were, really good books, and even if they found a good audience, because it's kind of the nature of books. There's a lot of them, and most of them, even the ones that are useful to people for a time, are not useful to people for a long time. And I think that's okay. Like I think that it's important to understand that like books exist to be read and to be responded to, and when they stop being helpful or useful to readers, like that's fine. Readers move on and they read other stuff, and that's okay. And that's not like that's not bad news, because the point of writing isn't to like make something that lasts forever. The point of writing is to like make a gift for people and connect with them however you can, whenever you can. I think that's what I think anyway. But I remember when I first sold Looking for Alaska, I went to New York City. I'd never really like been to New York before as an adult. I went once as a teenager, but I'd never really like spent any time in New York. And I met my editor, Julie Strauss-Gable, who's still my editor all these years later, and who edited the Anthropocene Reviewed book. And she said, what are your goals for Looking for Alaska? And I said, I would like it to make it to paperback, because a pretty big percentage of books that are published don't ever come out as paperbacks. Like they're hardcover books, and then they don't sell well enough to justify a separate paperback edition. And so that was that was really my only goal for Looking for Alaska. And then I guess like I hoped that it would be good enough or do well enough that I would get a second book deal and a chance to write another book. And everything else that's happened has just been strange and lovely. And the thought that somebody can read them who wasn't born when they came out is super strange to me. But also, yeah, it's just really lovely. And it doesn't make me feel old. So don't feel bad. I'm keenly aware of the fact that I'm old and out of touch, and that my first novel now reads like historical fiction with the entire plot spinning around, of all things, a payphone. A lot of talk about oatmeal. what's my favorite process? What is my process for writing? Asks Morgenstern. Oy, I don't know. It depends. I wish I had a process. It sounds lovely. Whenever I hear writers talk about their process, I just feel like overwhelmed with jealousy. I want a process. I want like a. I want to know what I'm doing when I do it. I mean, really, my process is that I start trying to tell a story, and I guess it's different this time because this is my first book of nonfiction. With this book, my process was that I wanted to. Well, I mean, the truth is, I knew I didn't want to write a novel. Like I talk about this in the introduction to the book, but I came home from the tour for Turtles All the Way Down, which was this big month-long tour around the country. And there's this writer, Allegra Goodman, whose work I like a lot. And she was asked once, who would you want to write your autobiography? And she answered, I seem to be writing it myself, but since I'm a novelist, it's all in code. And I think one of the things that made the experience of publishing Turtles All the Way Down challenging for me, and it was I don't want to sound ungrateful because it was a lovely experience, and I'm so grateful that the book got good reviews and that people have been so kind to it and have that it has found a lot of the people I hoped it would find, and that they've responded to it in the way that I dreamed they would respond to it. So it's not that it was an unpleasant experience, but it was a challenging experience for me. And one of the reasons was because it sort of felt like people knew the code. And I had invited a lot of these questions by having a public life as a mentally ill person, and then by writing about a person who had a mental illness. But it was pretty tough for me to be asked over and over again questions as if I were the protagonist of that novel, or as if I shared the worldview of the protagonist of that novel. It felt a little destabilizing. It felt like people were, and maybe this was my own fault, but that they were struggling to read the novel as a novel instead of read it as some kind of highly coded autobiography that they felt like a responsibility to try to decode. And I realized that there were a bunch of problems that were causing that. None of them were the fault of readers or even of the media people who asked me what I felt like were pretty some invasive and at times inappropriate questions. Do you get panic attacks when kissing? That kind of thing. But I decided while promoting that book that I didn't want to write a novel, that I wanted to not write in code, and that I wanted to try to grapple for the first time with what I thought and try to write from my own perspective about my actual self and my experience of being in the world. Insofar as I could, and to abandon the code at least for a while, but I didn't know how to do that. I didn't know what I was going to do exactly. But Hank and I would often talk when we were on the road. We would often talk about the strange and super fast way that the 5-star scale has taken over critical analysis. And how 2 or 3 decades ago, it was utterly unheard of for a book to be rated on a 5-star scale. And now books are rated on a 5-star scale, over 1 million times a day. And not just that, but that, people review restaurants, and they review The Bench, where The Fault in Our Stars was filmed in Amsterdam, and they review their haircuts, and they review public restrooms, and all of this stuff. And this 5-star scale has become ubiquitous, not because of humans or anything that humans need in terms of understanding the quality of an experience or of a good or service. It's because of machines. It's algorithms. For algorithms, a single data point is super, super helpful. When I reviewed books for Booklist, I reviewed hundreds and hundreds of books over the 5.5 years that I worked there. And not only did I never review a book out of 5 stars, it never would have occurred to me to, because in a 175-word review, you can just say far, far more than any single data point could ever convey. And yet we sort of like adopted this way of analyzing experience really, really quickly and without any, without much consideration, which is how a lot of like the technological adaptations of the last 20 years have happened. So we talked a bunch about that, and we read like silly Google reviews of the places we drove past, and from that I started to get this idea of wanting to write these essays about different parts of life and different parts of my experience. And because the other thing that we were thinking and talking about is that deep down, reviews, they may claim a kind of authority or a kind of objectivity, a sort of like above it all, this is good or this is bad or this is mixed. But what they really are is highly, highly personal memoirs, right? Like, this was my experience of reading this book, or this was my experience of eating at this restaurant. And that fascinated me, this relationship between the overall critical discourse, wanting to have an opinion that exists outside of yourself, but at the same time being so completely dependent on your own highly personal, deeply insular experience. So after that, I had actually, like, years earlier, I'd sort of like written some things that were sort of related to this, that were sort of in a similar vein. And so when I got home from the tour, unfortunately, I got really sick. All at once, without any warning, I got this disease called labyrinthitis, which caused my balance to fail completely. And I just started vomiting everywhere, and I had to be hospitalized. And there's a lot of things when your balance fails that can be very wrong with you. But even like, I got really lucky, and even the lucky version of it isn't that great, because I still have bouts of vertigo, and it's terrifying. It's awful. It consumes. You can't be anything else. It's hard to do anything else when you don't have a sense of balance. That's not a metaphor, like literally. And so as I was recovering from labyrinthitis over the next like 6 weeks of mostly being in bed, I was thinking more and more about this idea. And when I started to get better, I dug up these old essays that I'd written. One was about Canada geese, and one was about Diet Dr. Pepper. And I sent them to Sarah, to my wife, and she read them, and she was like, "Yeah, I mean, there's things that are good about this, but what's missing from it is you, like you're sort of like pretending objectivity, and you're acting as if you're an observer of these phenomena." When and this is something that she said to me that really, really stuck in my mind, and that ended up in the book. She said, in the Anthropocene, there are no observers, there are only participants. And so then I started to rework the essays to acknowledge that I am a participant in these systems, and that in some ways I have benefited from them, and in some ways I have been harmed by them, and these systems are not neutral, and that I am not neutral in observing them. And once I started to do that, the essays began to make a kind of sense to me that they hadn't made before, and they began to be able to like do something that they hadn't done before. So, as usual, Sarah and I collaborate really closely on our work, and we always have, for the last almost 20 years. So I'm really, really grateful to her for helping me see a way through into making the essays work. And then I started making the podcast with my longtime collaborator, Stan Muller, and with Rosianna. And now it's going to be a book, just 3 short years later. That's a little bit of a condensed version of what happened, but that's the basic outline of it, I guess. All right, I'm going to stack these sheets. Oh, I've got an unopened Diet Dr. Pepper that I'm pretty enthusiastic about. Speaking of Diet Dr. Pepper. then I'm going to look at the comments. And then I'm going to keep signing because that's what I've been doing for like 12 hours a day every day. And the rest of the time is spent working on the actual book. Ooh, most books signed in a single session is 4,649. No, I've signed way more than that. We don't have to talk to the Guinness people though. It wouldn't make me feel very good to, I don't know that it would feel very good to get that Guinness World Record. I feel like, yeah, I feel like that would be weird. Chris asks, dumb question, what's labyrinthitis? It's like a disease of the inner ear. Usually it's caused by, you get like a little viral infection, like just like a cold or a little flu or something. And then something goes wrong and your inner ear stops working, usually on just one side. And the good thing about it is that unlike a lot of inner ear disorders like Meniere's disease, which very commonly becomes chronic, or certain kinds of like vestibular neuritis, it does usually get better. It just, it's pretty common to have some long-term occasional vertigo, which I have in my case. So like if I get a little bit of a cold, I usually also get pretty vertigo-y, which is unpleasant. It feels like being super, like when you're super drunk, you know, and like the room is spinning, but all the time, and you know, yeah, you can't sober up, and also it's not your fault. You know, like in the past when I've gotten drunk and gotten dizzy, I've been like, well, you know, at least I did this to myself. So, yes, Jordan said it better than I can. Vertigo is all the drunk and none of the fun of intoxication. That's exactly right. Yeah, it is a very metaphorically resonant name, labyrinthitis, but it is still a really crappy actual illness to have. Lots and lots of people actually, when you start talking to people about this, lots and lots of people struggle with chronic vertigo, and man, it's tough. Like it's hard. I mean, it's hard, and also once you know it can happen, it's hard to get it out of your mind that it can happen. So even when you're not experiencing it, you still are conscious of the fact that like it could happen at any time, and you really don't want it to happen while you're driving or while you're inside of a store or something. Admittedly, less of a concern over the last year than it usually has been. But yeah, it can be quite serious. I don't recommend it. Is there a way to reply to someone's comment? I don't know, Hudson. I'm so bad at YouTube Live, as you can probably tell. Just got here. The number of boxes in this room is out of control. This isn't even all of them. This is just a selection. I built this box fort, but I didn't want it to be so. My worry with the box fort is that if it was too high, and one of them like came crashing down and it hit my head and killed me on a live stream, that would just be embarrassing. I mean, in addition to like, you know, the loss for my family and everything, and the just the disappointment of not getting to go on, there would be just the absolute unadulterated humiliation of it. So I decided to not build the box fort up any higher than that. I feel pretty secure with the level that it's at, but yeah, hopefully we'll be okay. I'm almost done. I'm almost done. I only have like 22 hours of signing left. So I just gotta do this. There's nothing else to say about it except that it has to be done. It's gotta happen. Yeah. Okay. But I'm looking for questions that I can answer while I sign. But oh, Sabrina and Friends is here. I just watched your video. I thought it was really good. I just watched it like right before I did this. I don't know if maybe YouTube was like, oh, I saw that you were watching this video, so I'm going to recommend to Sabrina and friends that they come to this. But anyway, hi. Can you wear a brace or anything for your hand? And have you ever self-published? How do you sign Kindle copies? I can't. I can't sign ebooks. I sometimes have signed ebook readers, but I cannot sign ebooks themselves. I also cannot sign the audiobook, and I cannot sign the international edition of the book. All of these are disappointments to me. I would like to be able to sign every copy of the book that goes to readers, because like part of doing this is trying to understand and like trying to say thank you in some small way to people who are pre-ordering the book and people who pre-order the ebook or the international, or who live outside the US or Canada, and people who pre-order the audiobook. Like I can't say thank you in this way by signing a book. So I guess I just have to say thank you by saying thank you. It's such a weird thing in general, the process of writing a book, because there's, somebody has to have a certain amount of faith in you and your work to want to pay for something that they haven't read a review of, that they don't know if they're going to like. I guess the Anthropocene Reviewed book is a little different. Like if you like the podcast, I hope you like the book. But even so, it's still an act of faith by the reader. Like buying a book is always an act of faith unless you've already read the entire book. And so I don't know. I've always wanted to try to find ways to say thanks. Like I remember when Looking for Alaska first came out in 2005, there were like 85 people who listed it as one of their favorite books on MySpace. And so I just went through and said thanks to each of them. And I would still like to find a way to do that, but without MySpace. And I mean, it's one of the strange things about writing and reading. Like I feel as a reader, I often feel like I can't adequately express my gratitude to the books that have helped me, and like because for me, like reading really does help hold me together and helps get me through and helps me, I guess, try to engage more deeply with consciousness. And I find it hugely important to me, and there is no way to thank the writers that I'm grateful to, or no way that I know anyway. Like, how do I thank Paige Lewis for their book Space Struck, which has meant so much to me and which has been so useful to me, especially this year, and it has given me language and form for talking about things that I find so difficult to talk about and so difficult even to understand inside of myself. You don't say thanks by like giving that person $1.20 or whatever their royalty, is for the book sale. I mean, I guess that's one way of saying thanks, but it feels utterly inadequate, especially for a book like that really has meant a lot to me. But then as a writer, I also feel the same thing. Like I can't fully express my gratitude to readers who would loan, my work however many hours of their one wild and precious life. It's an incredibly generous thing to read somebody else's work. And so, yeah, I never know how to parse that. I guess that shared debt. I don't know what to do about it. And I think I've been signing in part to try to bridge that gap or to say thank you somehow. But it's also inadequate, and maybe that's the lesson, is that everything is inadequate. Like, everything's inadequate. Have I ever self-published? Not really, although I have published a few things for charity that were not published through traditional means, I guess, including like a zombie apocalypse story about corn, and a couple other things. and then I've written a lot of things over the years that didn't end up getting published, and I don't think I'll ever publish any of that stuff. For me, I think everybody's different, and I don't think there's any one right way to write or to share your writing. And I think I used to have a lot of strong opinions about this stuff, but as I get older, I find myself with fewer and fewer certainties, and more suspicious of those who do have a lot of certainties. But I think there are lots of good things about self-publishing. There are a lot of advantages for me of working with a publisher, mostly because I've worked with the same publisher for the entire 16 years since my first book came out. I've had the same editor. I've been able to work with a lot of the same people in the sales and marketing part of things, and so I just feel really comfortable there, and I also feel like they make my work a lot better. Like working with Julie, my editor there, just makes my work so much better. It's very hard for me to imagine this pen is dead, what writing a book would even, to the graveyard of pens you go, what writing a book would even be without Julie, because I've never really written a book without her editing it. So, but that's all extremely particular to my experience. And of course, your mileage may vary. I can't remember the other question, but I liked it. But it's gone now. Whew. Okay. Okay. Oh, Princess Shorty has just discovered the YouTube emoji section. This is a big moment for you. Okay. Is there a way to read your zombie apocalypse novella? I'm sure there is. Like, I'm 100% sure that somebody has released a PDF somewhere. It's not good, so it wouldn't be the best use of your time. But I'm sure it's out there somewhere. There's like one page of it that I still like. I never like anything that I've published, but I always have a certain affection for the stuff I've had to abandon for whatever reason, or for the stuff that never came out. And there is one page of that zombie apocalypse story that I still really like near the beginning. But I'm able to like it in part because the rest of the story is so bad. That's what I think gives me the freedom to feel the way I do about it. I've always wanted to be, oh my God, I can't separate these pages. I've always wanted to write like big books, adventure books, where big things happen to people, like in an Absolutely Remarkable Thing or A Beautifully Foolish Endeavor. And that one page of the zombie apocalypse novella about corn is probably as close as I will ever get to that experience. So, yeah, I would really recommend the Anthropocene Reviewed book over Zombiecorns, but I think Zombiecorns is free and freely available if you just Google it. I might be wrong, but that's my guess. Oh, I see that I've unleashed a lot of emojis. Oh goodness. Oh my gosh. Okay. All right. Gosh. Yeah. Rachel calls Zombiecorns fun, which I think is pretty good. That's a pretty good description. Okay. My favorite Amazon India reseller is listing your book to pre-order. Will I get it signed? Probably not. I do not know your favorite reseller, but there is a different edition for the exports for any book that goes outside of the US and Canada. And there has to be a different edition for legal reasons. And for reasons that involve the actual physical mechanisms through which those books are printed, I cannot sign them. So yeah, so probably not, and I'm sorry about that, and I really wish I could sign it, but the signed edition is only available, so far as I know, in the US and Canada. I would really like publishing to change this, like just as a business, I would like them to change the way that they think about regional publishing, because like the world doesn't work that way anymore. You know, like you and I are having this conversation, even though you're in India and I'm in the Midwest of the United States, and like that, we need to change the way that publishing works and the way that the copyright works so that we can reflect that reality. But it hasn't happened yet. It is an ongoing frustration, and I'm really sorry. I know there are good reasons for it. I also, I don't want to get into a debate about it. But yeah, I think that if you order it, especially if you order it from Amazon, it will not be signed, but I might be wrong. I really don't know how to get a signed copy outside of the US or Canada. I have asked a bunch of times and I have been told, everything that I've been told is that it's not possible. I might be wrong, but that's what I've been told. So, yeah. Okay, let's answer another question that does not involve my friends at trillion-dollar companies that lie about whether or not my books are signed. Yeah, but I can't. Yeah, so lots of trillion-dollar companies often lie, and hopefully they offer refunds, would be my comment about trillion-dollar companies. Okay. There's certain private corporation. Yeah, I mean, so the thing to remember is that private corporations don't exist to do anything other than make money. They like do a lot of moralizing, and they try to justify. They do whatever they need to do by way of explaining their business model to do something, to make it about something other than making money. But like, no, like private corporations, like for-profit corporations don't do anything except maximize profits. Like that's the nature of what they do. So I mean, that's true for publishing companies as much as it's true for car companies, as much as it's true for goods distribution networks. The only time that's not true is when companies are either not set up to make a profit or do not generate profits. So yeah, I would just in general, I try to remember that companies are in the business of getting us to consume as much as we can. Okay, will DFTBA have signed copies? Probably not, at least initially. And I'm sorry about that, but that is also a function of the way things are going. How is the signing going overall? My hand hurts a lot. It's going okay. I have the ligament that goes from this bone to this bone is strained, and it hurts. So that's the main thing, is that hurts like every time I make that motion. That was not a very good signature because I was trying to make a rhetorical point. But yeah, it was a little more fun when it didn't hurt. But I still feel very lucky to be able to do it. I have about like 17 hours to go, about. So I can finish it. I know I can finish. The truck comes to pick it up over the weekend, so I need to finish. But that's why I'm in my basement right now doing this. So I can finish. It'll be okay. I'm glad that I'm not signing 260,000 sheets, just 250,000, because I think 260,000 might have been impossible. But in general, I think we kind of psych ourselves up to do what we have to do. And so that always means that the last part is hard. Like whenever I go on a really long road trip, it's always like the last hour that you really want to be home. So that's actually why I decided to do the live stream, because I've been down here since 7:30 this morning signing, and I was like, I just want it to be different. I want to be able to talk to some people. So thank you for keeping me company while I do this ridiculousness. But in general, like, I don't know, I feel pretty good. Like, I feel like my signature is holding up okay, which is always, my big worry is always that, like, the pen will get hard to hold, or my signature will start to look really nervous and jittery and exhausted. And so far, at least, like, it's holding up okay. I mean, I think probably the last 10,000 signatures on average have been a little worse than the first 10,000 signatures. But that's also to be expected. It's really nice to have. It's really nice to have these Sharpie colors that I love. So Sarah found a way to order obscure Sharpie colors in bulk instead of just having to get them as part of like mega Sharpie packs. So right now I'm signing with navy, which is a really beautiful color. Hold on, I'll show it to you. It looks like this. That's actually a pretty good signature too. So it's like, it's got some purple, it's got some deep gray and some black as well, and I really like it. And then the other color I really like is called Intergalactic Indigo. And so Sarah got me 25 Intergalactic Indigos. This is Intergalactic Indigo. Here you can see the difference. So this is Intergalactic Indigo and this is navy, and you can see, I mean, they're both beautiful colors, rich and a little multitudinous. So that you know, like, obviously Sharpie color doesn't matter very much, but when you do something, you know, 250,000 times, the little things matter. And it just makes me actively happier. Like, I talked about this a few weeks ago on Vlogbrothers. That, like, it's just actively happier to sign with purple sometimes, because it's a little joy in color. And I feel that way right now about navy and Intergalactic Indigo. Like, they are just the right amount of, they really have cheered me up significantly. Will you be pre-ordering Philip from Kurzgesagt's new book, Immune? In fact, I have read it and I have blurbed it. And not only have I read it and blurbed it, I also quote it in the Anthropocene Reviewed book. So, yeah. So there you go. I really, really like Philip's book about the immune system. So for those of you who don't know, Kurzgesagt was founded by a guy named Philip Detmer, who is also a friend of mine. And if you've ever watched a Kurzgesagt video, you know what a great writer he is. And he has written a book about the immune system, which is, you know, one of the most complicated, maddening facets of the human body. And it has all of that Kurzgesagt genius for being able to shift perspective and being able to zoom in and zoom out and find, you know, figurative ways of approaching really complex topics so that they become comprehensible. And it's just packed with fascinating information about the immune system. And overall, it made me feel much better about my body. Like, it made me feel like my body is working really hard to hang around, and it's got good strategies for doing that have been developed in some cases over tens or hundreds of millions of years, and it's actually a pretty cool body. So I love the book, and there's an essay or there's a chapter in it. Well, there's a number of chapters about viruses, and one of them I quoted in my review of viral meningitis in the Anthropocene Reviewed book. So yeah, so I actually had to because I think Philip is still finishing the last edits on the book, I had to check with him to make sure that the language of that sentence wasn't going to change so that I could actually quote it, even though the book isn't out. So, and he was very nice. He got that fact checked very quickly, which I really appreciate. Every time you say Kirk, oh crap. Every time you say Kirk, now I can't say it. Kirk, oh my God. Every time you say Kurzgesagt, you think Kierkegaard. Yeah, I'm referring to the YouTube channel. It's also known as In a Nutshell, but it's got a German language name, Kurzgesagt. I did it. I got back to it. Sometimes I get stuck on words like that, but then I got back to it. So, how many more sheets to go? I think about 15,000. So, yeah. Whew. What are you reading now? Well, I'm listening to an audiobook by Barbara Tuchman called A Distant Mirror, The Calamitous 14th Century. It's really good. It's about the calamitous 14th century in Europe, which was, I think it's safe to say, pretty calamitous in Europe, and led to, led to the modern world in a lot of ways. Things started to break down that that would shortly have big impacts. And that's been a really fun book to listen to. And then I just read Philip's book. I'm reading another book that's coming out soon called Reborn in the USA by Roger Bennett, the host of the podcast Men in Blazers. And that's really good. And I've also been, I'm trying to so I read different things in different places, there's books that I read when I'm down here that I read via audiobook. And then there's books that I read in the living room when I'm just reading in the evening or whatever. And then there's books that I read at night before I go to sleep. And I'm trying to remember what I'm reading upstairs. Oh, it's a book about the Romanovs. I mean, it's hard to write a bad book about the Romanovs because the truth is so freaking bananas. And so it is extremely enjoyable because it just tells the true and completely bananas story of the weirdest royal family, I think, in world history. So yeah, I've been reading, and then I've also been reading about smallpox because I'm writing a new mini season of the Anthropocene Reviewed. So there will be new podcast episodes starting in, it's not a very good signature. I'm going to add a spiral to that. There will be new podcast episodes starting in April. And so I'm writing right now about the smallpox vaccine, the story we've kind of inherited about the smallpox vaccine, and what really matters about the story of the smallpox vaccine, where the real where we should be centering the story. Traditionally, we've centered the story around Edward Jenner and his use of the cowpox virus to inoculate against smallpox, which is extremely important and was a defining moment in the history of medicine and in the history of public health, but also was not really the critical thing when it came to addressing smallpox. And we know it wasn't the critical thing because the deadliest century, Edward Jenner developed the first cowpox inoculations for smallpox in 1796. And, by the middle of the 19th century, vaccinations were quite good. Quite certainly not as safe as they are now, but they were still very safe and very effective. And yet the deadliest century of smallpox in human history was probably the 20th century, when we had a vaccine that was safe and effective for the entire century. So you can't really, I don't know the extent to which you can say like the center of the story of the smallpox vaccine happens in 1796, when the deadliest century for smallpox in human history was the 20th century. So I'm just trying to figure out how to write about that and what my perspective on it is. And then of course, like, it's also a highly personal thing because vaccination is not of abstract concern to me at the moment. Sarah and I got our first shots just a few days ago, and so I want to have a way to write about that and write about the experience of trying to understand what it means to be inoculated against an ongoing pandemic. And I think smallpox is I guess I'm thinking smallpox might be a good way into that, like a good way to frame contemporary concerns about vaccines, but then also the contemporary hopes around vaccination and the hope that vaccination has provided a lot of us and has certainly provided to me. We obviously, a lot of people worked really, really, really hard to make this possible, but it's the middle of the story, not the end of the story. And we do not want to look back at COVID and say the deadliest period of COVID was after we had the vaccines. And at least based on historical precedent, it's very likely, it's very possible and perhaps even likely that we will say that. So I'm trying to think about all that stuff and trying to figure out how to frame it and work it into an essay for the Anthropocene Reviewed. And then, so I'm reading about smallpox, which is pretty devastating reading. I mean, it's an incredible accomplishment by our species to have eliminated that disease from humanity, but what a terror. Like the word that people use around it over and over and over again is dreadful. And you realize that dreadful meant something else in the 18th and 19th centuries. It meant like something that filled you with dread. And this profound, deep terror around smallpox is really, it definitely has, it just resonates in a deep way with a lot of contemporary experiences around infectious disease, I think. So yeah, I'm just thinking about that, trying to figure that out. Katerina says, deadliest century in absolute terms or per capita? In absolute terms. There was a lot of population growth in the 20th century, but it's important to remember that population growth was driven primarily by the fact that we had more food and fewer of us were dying of infectious diseases. And a little bit, those were the two main reasons. So yes, few, like percentage-wise, more deaths in the 18th century. At least in Europe, we don't have great stats even in Europe for what really caused deaths in the 18th century, and we have terrible stats in most of the rest of the world. I almost feel bad ordering a signed copy. Logical Waste, please do not feel bad ordering a signed copy, because the thing is, I have to sign these regardless of whether you buy them. And so the nightmare scenario is that I sign them and then you don't buy them. So please don't feel bad. Please feel really, really good and know that I want you to have a signed copy of this book. Yeah, I've worried about that, but like, yeah, it's not just that all the pre-orders will be signed. Every copy that goes into every bookstore the first week that the book comes out will be signed. So there's going to be plenty of signed copies of available, and it's not like I'm only signing pre-orders and like you're going to make me sign an extra sheet because of your order. I'm going to sign it anyway, and I would love to sign it for you. I would write Logical Waste on this one right here if I had any confidence that that was actually going to get to you. But I think there's only a 1 in 250,000 chance that that was your actual signature page. So we're just gonna, but just know that if you get a copy signed in Navy, that I signed it during this very live stream. Maybe could have also been any time in the last 4 days, because I've been signing in Navy or Intergalactic Indigo that whole time. But you will know that it was at the end, and if you get green, you will know that it was at the beginning. That's basically how it works. Did you get along with Hank when you were a kid? Asks Stephen. You know, kinda. I was 14 when I went to boarding school. Hank was 11. So, I mean, he was in like 5th or 6th grade when I went to boarding school. So did we get along when we were kids? I remember us getting along. I remember us also fighting a lot, like normal brothers do. But we did not have really much of a relationship in those years, in those critical years for Hank, when he was between the ages of like 11 and 18. I always liked Hank, and in some ways I always looked up to him, even though he was my younger brother, because he was steady in a way that I wasn't steady, and he was like not a problem for mom and dad in a way that I was a problem, and he was, he's just like a good, smart, sweet, level-headed kid. And yeah, so I mean, we definitely had a lot of arguments, and we had a lot of fights and stuff, but I think we got along in the in broad strokes. It's just that we weren't very close because, I was gone from the time he was in middle school, and then but we continued. I mean, it was a weird thing because like we continued to like each other a lot. Like he was the best man in my wedding, and I was the best man in his, and we were very close in the sense that we had a ton of respect for each other intellectually, and we loved to have big conversations about stuff that really mattered to us. Like Hank and I have never really talked about everyday life together much, like. But because we just enjoy having different kinds of conversations, conversations about the stuff that we really, the stuff that we really care about, and also, frankly, like the stuff that we don't get to talk to other people about very much. And of course, now we talk a lot about work because, we work together, and we also have a lot of trust built up work-wise, because. There's nobody that I can, that I can trust quite like I trust Hank, because I've known him, my whole life. But the big reason we started Vlogbrothers back in, when we were initially having the conversations in 2006, the conversations were us talking about the fact that we only ever communicated via instant messenger or occasionally via phone, but almost always by email or instant messenger. and we wanted to be closer. I think I especially wanted to be closer because I felt a little bit like I'd abandoned Hank during this really critical time in his life, and that I hadn't fulfilled some of my obligations as an older brother because I'd been so caught up with my own problems. And my problems were real, and you, I think I had to be caught up in them, but I still felt bad. And so I think that was probably the initial reason why I proposed making a collaborative video blog in the first place, was that I thought it would be really nice to get to know Hank, and in that sense, it was extremely effective because I feel like it worked. Like, we are much, much closer now, and I feel like I've made up for those years when we were teenagers, when we didn't know each other well, because I was having a separate life. I was living somewhere else, and my friends were people he didn't know, and so on. But now we've been able to get really close as a result of having this shared project. And I think that's something that a lot of adult siblings need or benefit from. Certainly not universally, but I think it can be really helpful to have a shared project, a shared site of focus, so that you're not always talking about yourselves, or you're not always talking about what's happening in your life. You're also talking about this third thing. Like, Donald Hall has this essay that I write about in the Anthropocene Reviewed book called The Third Thing, where he talks about how in a marriage, a lot of what really happens is not looking at the other person or gazing deeply into their eyes. It's the experience of your gaze intertwining with your partner's gaze around a third thing, a site of shared contentment or joy, whether that be, I think most commonly it's children, but it can also be, he talks about how it can be the Boston Symphony Orchestra, or it could be 18th century furniture, or, there are all kinds of third things. And in a way, which third things you end up having are not as important as the pleasure of sharing them. And so I think for Hank and I, we're obviously not in a marriage, but like for Hank and I, that same idea has been important, that when we have a shared site of work, a shared project, a place where we're collaborating, is when we feel most connected to each other, and we have occasion, we have reason to talk. And sometimes I feel like you need a reason, you need an excuse, for lack of a better term. And of course, Vlogbrothers is now much, much more than just an excuse for me to hang out with my brother, but it is still that at its core. Like, I still make videos for Hank, and I still feel like he makes them for me. And I think that's part of what makes the channel work for other people, is that they know that I watch every video Hank makes, and he watches every one I make. All right, I'm going to stack again. Oh my God, there's still so many left. What time is it? Oh boy. Just gotta keep going. That's probably maybe till 7:30 or 8. Okay. Boom, 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 boom. But the pen is holding up pretty well, and I'm in mostly good spirits. And it just keeps happening. Like the rest of this year, it just keeps happening. I do feel bad. Some people were saying in comments about how frustrating it is to live in a country where vaccination rates are like 2% or something, and to see, like young-gish, I guess I'm not young, middle-aged, relatively healthy people like me getting vaccinated. And I know it is. I know it's frustrating. I can imagine how frustrating that is. And I'm really sorry. And I it is it's not fair, I guess is the main thing that I want to say. Like, I know it's not fair. Why do you refer to Europe as though it is a country? Well, Europe is a made-up construct, like even more than most continents are made-up constructs, but it is also real, like a lot of made-up constructs, because people believe in it. So, yeah, Europe has long thought of itself as a thing, and so as long as it has thought of itself as a thing, it has been a thing. But there are certainly different communities within any community that keep better records than other communities. So you're right that I probably should not have said we don't have great statistics about European death rates. I should have said we don't have great statistics about death rates outside of certain European communities. That's a good point. Hank is John's brother? It's true. It's true. It's true. This is a great question from Mismanaged. I practiced judo and suffered a shoulder separation a few weeks ago. My mental health suffered remarkably since. Do you have any wisdom regarding the mental aspect of physical injury? I don't have any wisdom about anything. I'm just an animal flailing about, trying to continue as best it can. I'm just a monkey wearing pants, flapping around with no idea what I'm doing, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That said, I have experienced physical injury that interrupted my exercise that I find really helpful. It's super weird, right? Because one of the things about when you have something in your life like judo or like running, where you get a lot of, there's a lot at work, right? Because it's also your identity to some extent. Like if you're a highly experienced athlete, or if it's a big part of your life, it can also be part of your identity. Like when people ask you who you are, you might answer, well, I'm, a college student and a mother, and I practice judo. Like it might be one of the top three things you say about yourself. So suddenly this is taken away by being hurt. And that's like a hit to not just like your ability to function in the world, because you rely on judo, for your health, and you get all these mental health benefits from exercise, which I also do. And I think is a lot of people who exercise experience big mental health benefits. So all that's taken away from you, which is not great for your mental health, because it's hard to figure out a way to be active, especially because there's a way that you like being active and you know what it is and you can't do it. And so doing other things is frustrating. Like, yes, you can maybe stand up, do a stationary bike where you stand up and don't move your shoulder, but maybe you don't like doing that. If you like doing that, you would have become a cyclist, not a person who practices judo. And so it can be a hit to your identity, while also being a hit to your ability to, move your body in ways that help your brain feel good. I realize that I'm creating a mind-body dichotomy there, which doesn't exist. Our brains are made out of meat, and there is no line between the body and the mind. So sorry for failing to break down that distinction, but it's very powerful in our culture that our minds are separate from our bodies. It's very hard for me to remember that the body is all the time deciding what the mind will think, and the mind is all the time deciding what the body will do. But anyway, but then the other thing about it is that it's not just about like who you are and how you think of yourself. It's also sometimes like a lot of your social life. Like for me, it's a lot of how I interact with people. Like I work out with my friends on Zoom every Saturday, and it's not just that I enjoy working out, and I also enjoy like talking to my friends and getting to catch up with everybody and making little jokes as we exercise and everything. And so that's taken away from you too, or can be, which is really, really difficult. All of this, none of this is like wisdom or advice. This is just an attempt at empathy. The only, I guess the only advice I have, if you can find a way to move as you rehab, do. Like, I think I find that helpful anyway. Like, what I like to do is run. And when running is not available to me because of an injury, like I have a broken toe right now. I mean, I wouldn't be running anyway because, because I spend 16 hours a day on this couch. But even if I weren't spending 16 hours a day on this couch signing my name over and over again, I still wouldn't be able to run because I have this broken toe. It's horrifying, by the way. It looks gangrenous. But I still think it's important to try to find ways to move your body. So like I can't run, but I can do I can do like squats, and I can do some weight stuff, and I can do, it's not as good. I can like put on boxing gloves and punch the heavy bag. I probably shouldn't say that to you since you have a separated shoulder. That's not going to help at all. But you can maybe still like move other parts of your body in ways that will help you feel engaged and everything. Then the social part for me, like I just have to get over myself and call my friends, which is really hard. Like, it's hard for me, and it gets harder if I don't do it. Like, I don't know if this is true for other people, but if it's almost like the longer I go without reaching out to people, the harder it gets to reach out. But then, of course, the more I need to reach out. There's this self-repeating or like vicious cycle that I really struggle to get out of, because it just like, it requires a lot of effort and energy to reach out to friends. And yeah, so, but that's what I would really recommend, is like try to reach out and chat with your judo buddies if you have them, even though you can't practice judo right now. I wish I had more wisdom. But I'm just like a fish that's out of water, like flailing, trying to get gills to go over my water. It's a snow water to go over my gills. It's a snowball effect, says Marion, which is exactly the term that I was looking for. Thank you. Okay. All right. Kim asks, how many languages do you speak? Just one. I don't even speak that one very well. I don't. Do you have any advice on how to do that outreach? Yeah, I think that you've got to like, so when I have to do things that are hard for me, but I see other people do easily, I often get really down on myself, and I get really negative and angry with myself. And I'm like, what the hell is wrong with you? Why can't you just reach out to this friend? Why aren't you better at text messaging? You freaking idiot. You're the worst. And that's so unhelpful. Like, the fact that something that's hard for you is easy for other people is not relevant, because you're not them. You're you. And it's hard for me. So like, maybe it's not hard for other people to, for instance, like send a bill in the mail, but maybe it's hard for you. So if you get mad at yourself and you just like get into a shame spiral, I'm never going to be able to put a stamp on that letter and put it in a mailbox. But if I can instead, this is what I do. I don't know if this will work for other people. And also, if you're concerned about your mental health, please reach out to somebody who's a professional. And if you don't feel comfortable doing that, reach out to a friend or a family member and say, hey, I'm not feeling great, and I would like you to accompany me on the journey to get some help. And in my experience, 99.9% of friends and family members will say yes. And the 0.1% who are unavailable, it's okay, and you can ask someone else. But yeah, like I cannot provide mental health advice. I'm not an expert at all. I can only kind of refer to my own experience, I think. But for me, I try to break that stuff up into little discrete tasks. So it does, like, so instead of getting mad at myself about the fact that it's easy for everybody else to send letters and it's hard for me to send letters, I just say, okay, let's break up this mailing a letter business into its constituent parts, and then we'll do them one at a time. So I've got to write an address on the envelope. That's excruciating, but I can do it. And now I've done one part, and now I've got to put the stamp on, and that's the second part. And then I'm going to have to walk it. Then I'm going to have to drive to a mailbox or walk it to my mailbox or whatever. And that's a third part. And those are the constituent parts. And I'm going to do them one at a time. And after I do each of them, instead of saying like a normal person could have done that much faster, you idiot, I'm going to say, hey, great work. I know that was hard. And the reason I know it was hard is because you've been trying to do it for 2 weeks and you haven't done it. And now you did it. So that was awesome. I wonder if you could do the second step since you're doing it. And then I do the second step and I'm like, that was great. Amazing. I can't believe you got that stamp on that letter. You're freaking killing it today. Go walk that out to the mailbox now. And it's done. So I think for me, it's mostly about like not being an asshole to myself at its core, but still encouraging myself to do stuff, to like try to break out of some of those cycles. I also think you can't I can't anyway, expect for it to happen all at once. I gotta be a little patient with myself on that front. Okay. Oh man. My hand really hurts. Hank is posting his TikTok drafts. That seems like a very bad news. I'm going to try not to worry about that. I'm going to try not to freak out about that. Okay. Can you ice your hand? Yeah, I ice it pretty regularly. But I don't want to ice it right now though. I don't really know why, but I just feel like it doesn't feel like it would work right now. Maybe it would. Maybe I shouldn't base my physical therapy routine primarily on vibe, but here we are. Now you guys got me freaked out about Hank posting his TikTok drafts. I don't have any TikTok drafts, for the record. When I make a TikTok, everybody sees it. The thought of making a TikTok draft, I don't even understand, like, how would it happen? Isn't the only way that you make a TikTok is that you have an idea for a TikTok and you think about it for a long time, and then eventually you say, I'm going to make the TikTok, and then you make the TikTok, and then you tell Peyton, who does the TikTok captions, that you've made a TikTok, and can they caption it for you, and then it becomes a TikTok. If there's another way to make TikToks, I genuinely don't know what it is. Like, I've never been on TikTok and thought to myself, like, oh, I need to respond to that immediately. I always feel like there's a lot of people out there who are going to be the hot take population on TikTok is high enough. It does not need my voice added to the crescendo. Oh. Sometimes I do think like every 40th or 50th Monday, maybe more than that, maybe every 20th Monday, I think to myself, I didn't think it this week because I didn't make a vlog for this video this week, but I think to myself, you make a video every single Tuesday. And I feel like that right now. I feel like I'm like, oh my God, you have to sign so many more of these. Like, it's both almost over in the sense that I've done 230 some thousand, and like not nearly over in the sense that I have so many left to go. That was a really, 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 really good spiral. Like really, really good. Like the whole live stream was building toward that spiral. I don't even know what I didn't like about the signature when I made it, that I felt like I had to add a spiral to it, because now I look at the signature and it looks fine. But thank goodness I paused to make that spiral, because I like it so much I might take a photograph of it. When I do one like this is this is a very weird thing, but when I do one that I'm like this pleased with, I sometimes want to keep it. I want to hoard it. We all have this impulse, right? That like yeah, I'm going to keep it. I'll tell you what I am going to do. I'm going to put it on top of the stack so that I can look at it again. Isn't that the saddest thing in the world? But I'm not going to hoard it. I'm not going to hoard it. I'm going to give it away. That's the whole point of this exercise. You can't keep the ones that you like. Oh, do you like Hank's TikTok? Yeah. I mean, yes. And I'm very glad that it's him and not me. I both love Hank's TikTok. He's probably my favorite TikToker. He's certainly in my top 3. And at the same time, I'm like, oh my gosh, that seems like a lot of work, a lot of pressure, a lot of responsibility. Yeah, it's a hard thing to navigate, being as popular as that in a space like that that's changing all the time. And I've had somewhat analogous experiences, enough of them to not think that what Hank is doing is easy. So I'm a big admirer of Hank's work in general, and I think that the way that he uses that platform is really lovely. And it brings out it. I really think that Hank is a force for good on the internet, and I admire his ability to continue using the tools of the social internet, even though I know that he's got to be affected by some of the more toxic elements of it. I couldn't keep doing it. I wanted to, and I knew that it would be good for my career too, and I just couldn't do it, man. So yeah, I admire Hank pretty much in every way. I really, really meant what I said in a Vlogbrothers video the other day, that we don't let the fact that Hank is younger get in the way of him being the wise older brother. And I look up to him and have a lot of admiration for him, and he works incredibly hard, and doesn't. I mean, he's not motivated by money, and he really is motivated by a deep sense of wanting to make the world suck less for people. And I find that extremely admirable. I don't think I really like Hank. I'm not just saying it. Yeah, he's pretty great. Oh man, my hand hurts. Who are my other favorite TikTokers? Oh, I don't think I know anybody by username. I mean, that's one of the weird things about TikTok, like just kind of like I have most of the TikToks I watch are like educational people in the educational TikTok space, which from what I can gather is not like the white hot center of TikTok. But that's where I tend to mostly hang out. Oh, there is an account I really like that I think is called Sync Reviews, and it's sort of like the Anthropocene Reviewed, but it's only for syncs, and I love it. Admittedly, like I'm biased toward highly in-depth reviews on a 5-star scale, but Sync Reviews is excellent. So that's definitely one of my favorites. But I mostly though, yeah, I'm on the sort of more educational science communicator, history teacher side of TikTok. mean, one of the weirdnesses of TikTok is that it is so highly personalized that, for instance, like I used my daughter's computer or something, maybe it was an iPad that she uses sometimes, to go to TikTok, just because I was trying to see what I was trying to see something I didn't know on my phone. And the TikTok that like opened up with me not having a username or whatever, like the sort of like natural background TikTok was so different from my TikTok that I couldn't. And I was like, these things have like 25 million likes. Like these videos are getting viewed 100 million, and I've never seen any of them. Like I've never seen any of this stuff of, and it wasn't, not that it was bad. It was like people dancing and like people doing extremely complex trampoline moves and diving off of, like extremely high pool diving boards. It's not like I'm not opposed to any of that stuff. I mean, I would not myself jump off of a high diving board, but like I 100% support people who want to live that dream. It's just like I was fascinated by how profoundly different it was, and how quickly TikTok is able to build a feed that really is just for you. You know, like occasionally I'll get, if I watch my For You page on TikTok, occasionally I'll see videos that are like clearly for 43-year-old guys in Indianapolis, which is even more like distressing and strange that there are people out there creating for Midwestern dads. And that TikTok is sophisticated enough to like get that to me. I don't know. Yeah, it's both the glory and the terror of contemporary internet discourse, right? Which is that we've handed over so much of our personal information to these companies that they're able to make stuff that's just for us, which in a way is joyous because we get to see, exactly what we're desirous of, but in another way is pretty worrisome, I think. And it also means that it means that there's room for highly niche creators, which I think is largely good news, that people, can make a living sharing the results of their woodworking hobby or whatever. So yeah, I mostly have just extremely mixed feelings about it. I've benefited so much from the internet, both like directly professionally, but also indirectly in terms of connections to people and being able to learn stuff I would have never otherwise learned, that it feels disingenuous to be entirely negative about it. But I am really worried about what these highly personalized media feeds are doing to us and how they're making conversations across some of those divides more complicated or even at times kind of impossible. And yeah, I just feel deeply unsettled about the whole thing, and I guess more than anything, uncertain. Trying to really embrace my uncertainty because it's all I've got right now. Okay. I'm gonna everybody be nice in comments. Be nice to everyone else. Odd Imagine says props to the mods, and I agree. Thank you, mods. Thanks for being here, even though I didn't give anybody a warning that this was going to happen. Okay, so am I going to go on a book tour? Asks SM. What a great question. Yes, kind of. Am I? Yes. So actually, that may be, I don't know how this is going to work yet, so I don't want to overpromise, but that may be the way that people outside the US and Canada can get signed books. I am going to go on a book tour. We're going to work with different independent bookstores around the US to set up events that are virtual, but that will still be super fun. We did this for Sarah's book when it came out, and they were really lovely events. And so I think we're going to do something like that. I don't yet know exactly what it's going to be, but it's not going to be people gathering in physical spaces. It's going to be digital. But we are going to try really hard to make it still special and still fun and interesting and to feel different from a regular live stream, so that it actually feels like a celebration of the book. I thought Sarah's virtual book tour, despite being organized with almost no warning, did a really good job of that. That it, Sarah made those events feel special and feel different from a Zoom call. And so that's kind of our aim with this. I still don't know exactly what shape it's going to take, but that's the basic goal. I wish that I could do a book tour. I've been thinking about this because Sarah's book came out in April, which was just the worst time to publish a book because the pandemic was just taking hold. Most bookstores in the US were closed. It was, obviously, it being a bad time to publish a book was not in the top 10,000 things that were bad about the time, but it was still bad, and it was still unfortunate because it's a great book, and I think it would have, and it's still reaching an audience, but yeah, it was just bad. It's really bad timing. And then Hank's book came out in July, which also wasn't great timing. Probably a little bit better, but still, rough. And then my book's going to come out in May. And so we all three of us have had books come out during this weird 14-month year. And I would really, really love, it's hard to even imagine what in-person physical events will look like on the other side of this, or how much a part of our lives in-person physical events will even be. But I would really, really love this Into the Garden of the Dead Pens. It goes, I way overshot that. That was way too ambitious. I brought way too much heat to that moment. Is this Intergalactic Indigo? We're changing to Intergalactic Indigo. I would really, really love to go on a tour with Hank and Sarah where we belatedly celebrate You Are an Artist and A Beautifully Foolish Endeavor and the Anthropocene Reviewed book, and also just celebrate being able to be in person again, being able to be with people and experience live events together again. So I don't know if that'll happen or when that'll happen, but it's definitely not going to happen in May when the Anthropocene Reviewed book comes out. But I do hope it happens someday, because I think, it would just be really lovely to be able to celebrate all three of those books, in the way that we would have wanted to, and to just tour together. I miss touring with Hank. Being on stage with Hank is such a thrill, and performing with Sarah is one of my favorite things. Seeing Sarah with an audience is so fun for me. She just brings such a cool energy to those events. She did this PowerPoint presentation on a couple stops of the Turtles All the Way Down tour about the art, the contemporary art in Turtles All the Way Down. And honestly, even thinking about it makes me want to cry, because it was just such a thoughtful way of honoring what I was trying to do in that book, and also honoring the connection, the one of our third things, which is contemporary art. So yeah, I would love to be able to do that. That's the one thing I want to do on the other side. But I haven't talked to either Hank or Sarah about that, so I probably shouldn't be pitching y'all this idea before I've consulted with the people I want to make it with. Yeah, so for now it'll be a virtual book tour, and I've been to a bunch of those events. Some of them have been really fun, and I think it can still be good. It's not the same thing, obviously, as being in a real space with someone, but we'll find ways to make it fun. Maybe I'll even get into costume. I don't know. Probably not. I don't even know if I still have the Bumblebee costume from the Absolutely Remarkable Thing tour. That feels very, very, so a long time ago, I dressed in this gigantic Bumblebee costume when Hank's book came out and we were on tour, and I pretended to be a professor of like the history of robotics, but I was also a bumblebee, and I was very resentful of the Transformers character Bumblebee for having, in my opinion, romanticized what it was really like to be a Transformer. It was the most complicated bit I've ever done on stage. It was a bit where the whole bit was 12 minutes long, and like 9 of the minutes were spent explaining the background of the bit. It wasn't very successful, but I loved doing it every night nonetheless. And I really I'm surprised because I'm not somebody who loves performing. Like I don't, I don't know that if I hadn't written books, I ever would have sought out an opportunity to like perform in front of people. But I'm surprised by how much I miss it. I mostly miss like being on stage with Hank and that energy, because he's so wonderful and unpredictable and everything. But man, yeah, I also do miss. I think I might just miss being in the proximity of other people, which not something I ever thought I would have the opportunity to miss. But gonna get through it, y'all. Just gotta keep going. One of the things that I've taken away from my extensive reading about pandemics in the last year and a half is that they do end. They really do. They often feel to people inside of them like they're not going to end, but they end anyway. The Spanish flu was very much that way. Yeah, so they do end. It will get better. I mean, I think in some places it is getting better, but it will get better. All right, I got to stack these sheets. I still have full range of motion and everything, so that's good. Like usually by the time I go to bed, I'm kind of like a little, like my hand's a little bit in a permanent fist. That's actually not a half bad spiral either. I've been doing okay with spirals today. A lot of the spirals that I've signed over the last 250,000 copies are really, this is much, how did that go so fast? Am I missing some? What time is it? Oh, it's just that time went faster. It's much more entertaining when you're here. What's going on? Someone asked. That's a great question. Let me bring you up to date on the situation with the live stream, and also just the situation with me in general. My name is John Green. I'm one half of the Vlogbrothers, and I have a new book coming out called The Anthropocene Reviewed, in which I review different facets of the human-centered planet on a 5-star scale. But that's not really what the book is about. Really, the book is, it's a memoir. about you know, what it feels like to have one little life run into the big forces of the Anthropocene. And I am signing the entire first edition of the book. So I'm signing every copy of the first printing of the US and Canadian edition of the book. You may be thinking to yourself, how are you doing that? The answer is, well, slowly. Basically, I sign these sheets of paper. They're called tip-in sheets. And then I mail all 250,000 tip-in sheets to the printer, which is in Virginia. And then there's a machine at the printer that while each copy of the book is being binded, it shoots this sheet in right between the end papers and the title page. And that's where the sheet goes. So that's how each book gets signed. I sign the paper, the binder puts the sheet between the end paper and the title page. How much does shipping all of these boxes cost? I don't know. I don't pay for that. Penguin pays for that. I have no idea. I bet a bunch. But the cool thing, I mean, there's a lot of cool things about writing this particular book because it's my first book of nonfiction, and also because it's my 6th book. And so I know a lot more about how books are made than I used to. And so I've been able to use some of that inside knowledge to put a lot of Easter eggs into the book. Like, for instance, in the first printing of the book, like, there's the end paper. Let me get you a book to show you what I mean. I bet I have one here. I bet I have a bunch. Hold on, I'll be right back. Oh my gosh, I haven't stood up in so long. Oh my gosh. Does this have end papers? It does. Okay, so this is an Australian copy of The Fault in Our Stars, which is a book that I wrote like almost 10 years ago. I think the Australians made this one edition of The Fault in Our Stars that like came out, I don't know, like 5 years after the book did or something. And it's actually quite a beautiful book. It's all foil covered and everything, and it's got this quote from Markus Zusak on the bottom, who's one of my favorite writers, but also he's Australian. So like I think that they included this because he's Australian, and they were like, oh, people in Australia know. Anyway, so then you open up the book. That's the dust jacket, right? And then you can take that off if you want. And then this is called the case. This is like where this is the actual book. And this is called the case. Sometimes the title is printed on the case. Sometimes it's just a case. But usually on the spine here, there's like, you know, the name of the author and the book and everything. So there's some cool things about bookcases is that they've got these little, see that little thing up there? That little band at the top and the bottom. You get to pick the colors of those bands, which is always something that I've enjoyed. But if you open up a book, any hardcover book, most hardcover books anyway, you see this. These are end papers. Well, before the actual like text of the book, they make these end papers, and the end papers go on both sides, and they're part of the binding process. They're not purely ornamental the way that like some of the stuff in books is now. Like for instance, this page where it's before so there's this page, and then there's the title. Well, in this case, there's like a couple pages before the title page. But when you open up the book and you see the first paper page, it just says the title. And then you go another page, and there's like some nice things that people said about The Fault in Our Stars. Then you have to go to another page before you get to the title page. Now, it used to be that the reason for these pages was real and very important because of the way that printing used to happen. But now this is mostly ornamental. The end papers, though, are actually like there's a real reason for them in the binding process. They're not just ornamental. And I've always liked end papers. Like these particular end papers, you can see have these asterisks, snowflakes. It's hard to know what they are. They're abstract symbols. And but so the way that the tip-in sheet happens is that here's the end paper, and then instead of this sheet being here, that's where the signature page is, right? But because like we had more control over the printing and everything this time, these end papers in the Anthropocene Reviewed book are actually like taken from my circle drawings, for those of you who've maybe seen the fact that I obsessively draw circles. And then on this page, opposite the autograph, there's a review of autographs, which we had a lot of fun making. And there's a few things like that throughout the book where, like, because I knew more about how the book was printed, I was able to insert little things into the book that I've never been able to do before, and that were a lot of fun. So, yeah. Anyway, thank you to Marcus Zuzak for saying nice things about The Fault in Our Stars, and also for just being a great writer. I don't know if y'all have read The Book Thief or Bridge of Clay. I Am the Messenger, but yeah, he's a great writer. Oh, somebody said, now I really need to pre-order it. Well, I mean, hopefully the like 4-sentence review of autographs is not the main draw of the book, but we have tried very hard to make a beautiful book. Zachary asks a critically important question. Oh, Juliet says that they're stars. That makes sense. They're stars. They're stars. That does make sense. That hadn't occurred to me. I think it hadn't occurred to me because, like, The Fault in Our Stars is, of course, not about stars. One time, I can't remember. Oh, Zachary's question was, what do I think about dust jackets? So one time, like, sometimes when you do interviews, especially when you do like interviews for movie stuff, like you're being interviewed by somebody who, you know, like they host their local morning show, and like they have like 67 guests a day, 5 days a week for years and years and years. And it's not like they can read every book or watch every movie that they interview people about. And so I can't tell you how many times while promoting the Fault in Our Stars movie, I was asked some version of like, how did you get interested in astronomy? And I was like, well, I mean, I'm getting interested in astronomy just by having to figure out how to answer that question. But before that, it wasn't like a natural inclination for me. Zachary asked, what do you think of dust jackets? So I love them, but I've been thinking about this because I was reviewing in the book, I review half title pages, which are these like pages at the beginning of books that just have the title and the author's name, usually, or just the title, and usually no design. And I like half title pages, even though they're now mostly ornamental. I don't know. Julie was saying that she doesn't think they're entirely ornamental, but like from what I understand of the publishing process, like they're mostly ornamental. And dust jackets are the same way. Like, is there a purpose to a dust jacket? Kind of, right? Like, sort of. It's beautiful, but it also sort of serves a function in the sense that it's there to protect the case or whatever, and to prevent the case from getting too dusty, I suppose. But mostly it's an anachronism. But like all of books are an anachronism. Like, you know, the idea of an autograph is an anachronism. And so I think that I think that I do like dust jackets, but I don't know that I would like dust jackets if I were if I'd been born in the year 2005, because I might have a very different relationship with text and with reading, and I might not so closely associate reading with books. But I have really fond memories of the first, you know, hardcover books that I owned, and I like that books are beautiful objects. Like I can't help but want like I'm just interested in the mechanics of making a physical book and all the intricacies in it, and it also extends us back 500 years. Like, the Anthropocene Reviewed book is set in this font called Bembo, which is one of my favorite fonts, despite not having a very good name. And the font itself was like created in 1930, but it's based pretty closely on a font from 1495 from Venice. And that's such an interesting time in world history, because between 1467 and 1500 in Venice, Venice went from having no printing presses in 1466 to having over 400 printing presses in 1500. By, very, very quickly, things went from a situation where almost all books had been written by hand by someone, to a situation where like millions of books were being printed, or millions of documents anyway were being printed every year. And Venice was right at the center of that. Venice really became the center of publishing. And it was in Venice that Roman type, I might be wrong about this, but I believe it was in Venice that Roman type was invented, that like fonts began to look less like handwriting and more like something else. Like type began to look like type instead of to look like really neat handwriting. And it was in Venice that italics first emerged as as an alternative to Roman type. And it was at this time that the font that Bembo is derived from was first cut, and for a travel log, for a sort of memoir-y book about this guy visiting Mount Etna. And like, I can't help but love that there's a sense of continuity between that travel log and the one that I've tried to write about, traveling through this weird moment in history. And also, I think about the other books that I've read that were set in Bembo, like Mountains Beyond Mountains by Tracy Kidder. And so I love the bookmaking process so much, and I love all the choices involved in bookmaking, aside from just the writing part of it. Like, I love the production part of it. Before I was a writer, or before I wrote Looking for Alaska, and before I was published, I worked as a production editor at Booklist Magazine. Like, initially I just did data entry there, and then eventually I was promoted to be a production editor, and I got to learn about how like how magazines get made, and the physical process through which they're produced, and the process of laying them out, and how kerning happens, and how lines get justified so that they're the same length on the left and the right, and all kinds of stuff like that I just found completely fascinating, because it shapes your reading experience. Like, white space shapes your reading experience, where there are space breaks, and what kind of doohickeys or lines separate the paragraphs in a space break. Like, all of that really does shape your reading experience. The font shapes your experience, whether it's a hardcover or paperback does. And so, yeah, I mean, I definitely think you can get too in the weeds of that stuff, and then it gets a little pretentious and navel-gazy at some point, but I can't help myself. I really like it. It's just something that I'm into. So I'm excited about the book for a number of reasons. Like, I mostly hope that the book is good, and all the a really great font doesn't make a bad book good, but I have enjoyed being able to work with Julie again on making a book. It's something that we've only gotten to do together 6 times, and so I feel really lucky to be able to do it again. And hopefully this isn't the last time. Like, I hope I write more books, but you never know. It could always be your last one. So trying to enjoy the parts of this process that are enjoyable. And definitely thinking about end papers is super enjoyable for me. Okay, let's see other questions. Do I have a favorite book? Um, uh, do I have a favorite book? I don't really. I have books that I keep going back to, you know, but I don't know that I have a favorite book. Like, you know, one of the pleasures of being middle-aged that nobody tells you about is that when you're 20, you can't go back to a book you loved 20 years ago and find that it has changed with you because, you know, you're only 20. But now I can do that. And it's fun to watch books that I've loved for a long time grow up with me and change over time. I definitely have that relationship with Sula by Toni Morrison, Song of Solomon. Also feel like I have that relationship with Gatsby. I guess I have that relationship with Catcher in the Rye in the sense that it changes as I reread it because I change. I don't think I knew what I loved about Catcher in the Rye when I was 16, and now I love the book less, but I understand what I loved about it more, if that makes sense. And there's a few other books like that I keep going back to, and that I find a lot of joy in going back to. But I also love discovering new books, and like it's hard to say that they aren't favorites just because they're new. You know, like I didn't read Parable of the Sower until I was probably 36 years old, maybe even older, and I love that book, and I've reread it a couple times in the intervening years. You know, the young adult books that I read when I was starting out as a YA writer, like If You Come Softly, Monster by Walter Dean Myers, Speak by Laurie Halse Anderson. Those books still loom very large for me and shape my thinking in ongoing ways. It's hard to pick one favorite. Huck Finn is another book that I've gone back to a lot over the years. It's hard to pick a favorite. I love rivers, so I'm very, very fond of Huck Finn because it's a great American Mississippi River book. Whether or not it's the great American novel, it's definitely the great American Mississippi River novel. Yeah. So there's a bunch for me. It's hard to pick just one. Somebody asked if anxiety affects my ability to work, which it does. I mean, I have OCD, which is not technically classified as an anxiety disorder. And again, I'm not a psychologist and not an expert in mental health. And I rely on the expertise of other people, of my therapist, of my psychiatrist, in order to understand and treat my mental health disorder. And I think it's really important to rely on experts. But yeah, I mean, you know, there are times when I think of it as similar to other chronic health problems. I also have a chronic health problem in labyrinthitis, like ongoing occasional vertigo. And, you know, my brother has a chronic health. My brother has a chronic health problem in ulcerative colitis. And so for me, sometimes it's better, sometimes it's worse. When it's bad, it can be very bad. And I try to manage it. It's more, you know, it's usually well managed at this point because I have, you know, a good medication regimen, and because I have a lot of tools from cognitive behavioral therapy, and because I've had years of experience with exposure therapy and all kinds of stuff like that. But it still gets bad. Much of the last year has been really tough for me because you don't. One of the ways that I've always managed my obsessive thought problem is by turning to people outside of me for reassurance and being able to see almost a way that, they always say to look at the flight attendants when you're experiencing turbulence, and if they're not worried, you don't need to be worried. But, in the last year I looked up and everybody was looking back at me the way that I had long been looking at them. And that was part of that's part of what's been hard about it. It's also just been hard because I think it's been hard for a lot of people. And so there have definitely been times when it wasn't well managed, when it affected my professional life for sure, slowed down my writing, made it on some days so that I couldn't write. Like when I'm sick, when I've been sick in the past, it's not just that I can't write a novel. I can't read a menu, I can't function. Sometimes when I'm really unwell, I can't get out of my thoughts and my dread and my fear enough to make it through a sentence in a novel, let alone, experience the pleasure of being distracted by a story or a movie or whatever. So yeah, it can profoundly affect my ability to be in the world and to be the things I've got to be, a father, a spouse, a brother, a writer, a work colleague, etc. And I think that's true for a lot of people with chronic health problems. I try to treat it that way and think of it that way because I find that construction helpful. I know other people sometimes don't, but I do. And yeah, it's not an easy thing to live with, but I still have a really wonderful life. Just as I think ulcerative colitis is a really hard thing for Hank to live with, but he still has a really wonderful life. And I think that's important to emphasize because, especially when you're inside of a period of intense unwellness, it feels so permanent and it feels so entire. Or I don't know, I shouldn't speak for you. When I'm inside of those experiences, they feel so entire. They feel like they truly do circumscribe my consciousness. And it feels like it can't get better. And it's not just that the moment itself is so painful, although the moment itself can be very painful. It's also that I think William Stein referred to the foreknowledge that no relief will come. It's also that sense of foreknowledge for me that I feel this foreknowledge that things will never get better. And that's the lie. I think the pain is real, and I think the pain is terrible and should be lamented and should not be minimized. But the foreknowledge of permanence is a lie. It just is. That part of despair is always a lie, I believe. And that's maybe somewhat of a quasi-mystical or theological belief or whatever, but I do believe it. And that has been my experience so far, that things that, most things that felt permanent proved not to be. And if there's anything that I've noticed about the universe so far, it's that, everything tends to end. So yeah, that's the thing that I really have to fight against, is that lie that this thing that sucks is somehow permanent. Okay. Oh, I think I'm going to do it. I think I'm going to get through this. I still have to, do all of tomorrow, but I think I'm going to be able to finish my goal for today, which will be really nice. So I'm going to end the live stream shortly, go upstairs, maybe have a beer, and then finish off these last 6 Nope, more than 600. Oh, well, somehow I tricked myself into thinking that it was either this or this, but it is in fact both. So it's like maybe 900. So yeah, probably 900. But look at this hand. It's in great shape. But this is like almost 5,000 that I've done today between these three things. I know some of you have just been waiting for the Electro Jogger this whole time. You've just been thinking, I don't really care about watching this person sign their name over and over again. I'm just here for the Electro Jogger. And who can blame you? It is the highlight of every live stream. Here it is. Here it is, folks. There it is in all of its glory. The greatest piece of machinery ever created in all of human history, the Electro Jogger. Let's take an up-close look. I feel like we don't actually get up close very often with the Electro Jogger. Look at this beast. Look at it. Just look at it. It's phenomenal. It's got a solid wood casing, and then it does this. It just 1962, the greatest year of electro jog manufacturing. Here we go. All right, so here's how this works. You see these huge stacks of paper so high that we can't even see the top of them. So you take some of these papers. Now look at these papers. This is no good. They're not lined up. How are they ever going to fit inside of this tiny box when they're all out of woozy woods? Well, the answer is inside of the Electro Jogger. Just watch this magic. And just like that, observe perfection, actual perfection. A world where everything becomes more chaotic over time is suddenly and briefly a world where life gets more organized and more sensible. Oh, it's so beautiful. Let's do it a couple more times. It is again completely perfect because the Electro Jog is perfect every single time. It's the single most reliable thing in the known universe. Even after 70 years of electro jogging or whatever, it's still out here electro jogging. Absolute unadult. Well, I messed that up a little bit, but that wasn't the Electro Jogger's fault, to be clear. That was me. Other than that, unadulterated perfection. They put these little blue dots on the bottom so that I know which side to sign so that I don't sign upside down. All right, so everybody got to enjoy the Electro Jogger. Now I'm going to go finish signing. Oh, that's very bright. Goodness gracious. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for enjoying the electro jogging with me. And I don't actually know if it's called Electro Jogger or Electro Jogger. They're available on eBay, though. I looked up one last night just because I was like, what if my Electro Jogger breaks? Thank you again for being here. And I will probably do another one of these over the weekend if I'm not done signing. Otherwise, thank you so much for helping me get through this. DFTBA.